we're going to explore how technology adoption and use has changed and been accelerated due to COVID-19. Joining me are Kareem Farah, CEO of Engineering Contracting Company, Nour Kassassir, Vice President and Chief Information Officer for the EMEA Business Unit at Parsons, Tertius Wolfaardt, Business Development Manager for Strategic Alliances at Axis Communications Middle East, and Nathan Doughty, CEO of Asite. Kareem, I'm going to start with you. Now, it's been widely reported that digitalization in construction and technology adoption has accelerated since COVID-19. So I guess a good place to start is, how has that adoption surprised you since the onset of the pandemic? And what are the main changes that you're seeing in the way that your staff and your company is operating?
I guess the major one that has really jumped out is the way that we have been forced to communicate. So Teams and Zoom was one of the biggest technologies that was thrown forward. I mean, these technologies have been around for, I don't know, at least a year or 2 years, but I know that in our company, for example, we probably wouldn't be using it to this extent for at least another year or two. So COVID-19 definitely forced us into using the video conference and Zoom and Team in order to do our meetings without having to leave our homes. Another one is monitoring the sites through cameras. I mean, we were doing this anyway beforehand, but it was definitely, we've definitely had to increase the number of cameras that we have on sites in order to monitor how the sites are progressing. Cloud-based services have definitely been pushed forward so that now we can share files again from the comfort of our homes. We're looking now, and we feel that with the difficulties that we faced in order to get laborers to the site, you know, we had to reduce the number of laborers on buses by at least a third. So this is definitely making us as a construction company, an ECC, think towards more modular construction in order to reduce the number of laborers that we'd need to have on the site. We've had to build disinfectant gates at the site as well to disinfect our laborers going in and out of the site, and as well as the labor accommodations. And yeah, now we're thinking a lot more about going paperless as well, in order to reduce the amount of paper that we have to pass around to each other, and that as well will reduce the spread of the virus. And digital signatures are another factor that we're also looking at. So, I mean, technology has always been something that an ECC group, we've always been looking at. So we have been looking at this over the last couple of years, but I definitely think since March, since COVID-19 has come in, we've really had to emphasize and focus on it a lot more.
Okay, and Tertius, how about for yourself?
Thank you, Rob. Good morning. From my side, I fully agree with what Kareem is saying. From what we also see is that I think purely the adoption rate of technology and how companies are almost forced due to the current situation to do more things virtual is really being pushed on another level. If I just take myself as an example, if you look at your calendar, the amount of Teams calls that you have on a daily basis compared to virtual or face-to-face meetings that you could do, I think for a lot of companies and so for Axis itself is just the travel time that we used to have when traveling to different countries or just traveling to different cities is now pretty much nullified. I think production or just people's the amount of work that you can do on a daily basis is almost increasing, but also like Kareem also mentioned, things like cloud is becoming extremely important. The way we share things, the way we work, the way we do meetings. If I take an example, the way we used to work in the past, especially with government and these type of entities, these used to be very face-to-face based meetings, and the current situation has really forced us into where people never really open to having these virtual conversations, that this is almost the preferred way of communication nowadays. So I think really technology is being adopted much quicker than it used to be. From our world, also the way technology is evolving is definitely much quicker than it used to probably 6 months ago. So I think there's always a pro and a con to any situation, but definitely from a travel perspective, for me personally, if I think maybe a year or two ago, getting on a plane and going to a neighboring country, doing a few meetings, coming back, it used to be quite a process to meet people, and now it's almost people are freeing up and being more open to these type of conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting how quickly people have actually embraced this. But of course now the travel it does mean that you're kind of working much faster. But Nour, what have you seen in terms of the main challenges? For instance, getting people on board or dealing with regulations. Has that been a lot of work in terms of investigations to make sure that companies are complying?
Thank you, Rob, for having me on this panel. Yeah, certainly there has been many challenges at multiple fronts. Regulations is one of them. Also, operationally, how the end user is going to be able to support it from the back end to do their work from working from home or working from anywhere. I mean, if you look at the impact, most organizations have their employees concentrated in offices. There's mass concentration. What COVID has done is basically take that concentration and distribute that workforce across the geographic locations within the proximity of the office, or further than that. So with that in mind, now you see, instead of supporting a massive users inside of an office, now you have multiple users distributed across a geographical area. And for Parsons, for instance, we operate internationally in multiple countries and multiple cities within that countries. So now you have multiple hundreds of thousands of users that we need to support. So speaking of, from a technology standpoint, we are lucky that this technology is there to be able to address these issues, at least for the short term, then think strategically how we're going to address it long term. From Kareem talked about the adoption of Microsoft Teams and WebEx and Zoom and others that allow voice over IP. Well, we all know within the Middle East, particularly within the GCC, there are regulations against that. Prior to COVID, that they don't allow you to use voice over IP. For instance, at Parsons, we use voice over IP in the US, across the states, but we couldn't use it outside in the Middle East because of these regulations. So with COVID, we had to spin our wheels very quickly and start contacting the TRAs and the telecom providers in the various Middle East countries to really verify with them what's their position from a TRA perspective. Do they allow to use of VoIP, voice over IP? And we had to do that very quickly. And luckily, the TRAs of the GCC countries changed their position around VoIP, and they allowed it, which really takes me to a very common, a famous quote by our chairman and CCO, Mr. Charles Harrington, where he says, "Technology is like water; it seeks the path of least resistance, always moving forward, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but never stopping. Today, the dam has broken, and what was once a trickle has become a torrent." And in this particular case, COVID is basically was the catalyst to cause that torrent, and they quickly, caused organizations and authorities to change their positions around technology and adopt it. From an operations standpoint, we had to think about a lot of things. How are we going to support the end users? How are we going to deliver the software to the desktop? Is it through push technology or pull technology, especially in the engineering industry, where our applications are very huge? And if you want to push it through push technology, it doesn't warrant itself to really be able to get that software to the end users in a timely manner. Parsons has its own systems around that where we use the pull technology. And also, you know, in our engineering industry, a lot of applications are data rich. And we all know that the law of physics applies where you need the data and the application close together in order to optimize the productivity of engineers. So we had to think through all of that, you know, at Parsons to address these challenges.
And I think actually your comment there was quite interesting about water always finding the path of least resistance. And it leads me quite nicely to Nathan, because now you're based in the UK, and in the UK, the government has brought out a roadmap paper very recently on the reinvention of construction. What big changes do you think this will bring about?
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. And it's a pleasure to be on this panel with these gentlemen and in the Construction Technology Festival. I am in the UK, where, as you say, where it's still struggling to get light. Nour, I think what your analogy about water always going downhill and the dam breaking, absolutely spot on. COVID has been a shock to all of us, both in our personal and working lives, but also at an economic level in our macro economies. So albeit I'm in the UK, we operate globally and are very active in the UAE and the Middle East. And I think we've all seen that shock, both the disruption and the kind of subsequent or consequent restart, reset, and reinvent process that we're going through, which leads back to your question, Rob. The Construction Leadership Council in the UK published a paper in the summer, in late June, and about how we as a construction industry, construction engineering industries globally, will or should react and respond to these shocks. They advised a catchy triumvirate of responses, starting with restarting, resetting ourselves, and then reinventing the way that we work together. Now, my take on that is that in line with what Nour, Kareem, and Tertius have said, is that the changes that we're going through, that we're seeing, the adoption of digital engineering technologies, and this kind of rapid digitalization is not new. It's something that I've spent. I'm a man of a certain age, and I've spent my career, working with many others at my side, which is trying to bring our construction and engineering industry into the digital age. Is not new. Teams and Zoom and WebEx, all these collaborative technologies have been around for a while. What's new is that we've been forced to adopt them, and we've responded. We've picked up the baton. So the kind of the focus that we all need to have, I believe, going forward is how do we maintain an open and collaborative approach to this with all the new tools that we have. How do we ensure that all the players in the process, from the guys on site to the planners in the office, to the designers and architects and engineers, how do they all have a common view, or at least as common as possible of a view? And for me, openness and an open data-based approach is core to all of it, regardless of who's delivering or which technology partners you're engaging with.
Sorry, open database approach. Can you just elaborate on that slightly?
Sure. Yeah. So okay. So fundamentally, we need to speak a common language in order to, on a project, to talk about what we're building. right? And what we're designing, developing, and delivering. So that can be start with simple things like a shared environment to exchange data, a shared environment to collaborate, and a common structure for how we call things, quite simply. So a data structure, or effectively a database. Now, there's lots of data. If I use that term database, there's lots of databases out there on offer, right? You can get it. You can go out to any vendor of technology, or any expert in the field, and they will give you their hand on heart best attempt at describing things. Well, what we really need is to just agree at the base layer, a common language, that lingua franca, to kind of get us around the Tower of Babel.
Okay. Tertius, just moving back to you. You, at the beginning, were talking about how now you didn't need to travel as much because obviously so much more can be done remotely. As people have started to struggle to travel, that also means that it's more difficult to monitor your site, your construction site, for instance. Are you seeing a change in how, because I know, and I don't really want you to go into detail about your products because that's not the idea of today, but I know that you produce cameras that are monitoring. So are people using those differently now? Are they rethinking how they monitor their sites?
Definitely, Rob. To be honest with you, that technology has been around for many years. Again, I think a lot of technology is being adopted in different applications where people, like you said, can't travel anymore, or it's restricted on traveling. So what we've seen, for instance, is that there's a need for people to monitor, we call it time-lapse videos of construction sites or buildings, where, for instance, you might have overseas investors. These guys might travel to the country typically, come have a look, come see how the progress of the building might be. So yeah, you could have technology in your favor and actually almost create a progress video or progress images of actually how your building is actually being constructed. What we also see is that technology, for instance, in a commercial or retail environment where we talk about things like occupancy, is becoming extremely important in the sense of COVID due to social distancing, where we need to now start understanding how many people are in a specific area and also how many people are allowed to be in a specific area. And again, by means of technology, we can really start to understand in a certain environment, due to regulation, I might only have 10 people in this environment, 10 people might be allowed. And by means of technology, I can see currently, okay, there's 9 people in the environment. When the 10th person goes in, a system can notify me and tell me that you are at the limit, you can't send another person into this environment. Or you can be in an environment where, say, for instance, you're going to the airport and you're going to a check-in counter, that there is some sort of a technical technology that allows you to measure the distance between people standing in a queue, as an example. And if people get too close to each other, you can have audio as an example to notify you and tell you, please be aware of social distancing. And it can even go as far as to say every 15 or 20 minutes, please remember to wash your hands due to COVID, and etc. So there are ways of using technology for multiple applications where in the past the technology was there, but again, the current situation has forced us to almost retrofit some technology. And very important is, how do we take the technology in the future that we've implemented today and we can reuse it and repurpose it going into the future? So we've really seen some unique use cases, but again, a lot of these technology were around, but the emphasis has really been created today to start using it more and to allow us to do more in a day-to-day use.
Yeah, okay. I mean, if I can also jump in there, Rob, I mean, you've also got the infrared cameras that you see everywhere now. You walk into any mall, any store, they've got the infrared cameras that can immediately tell your temperature. Actually, from my perspective, we're mainly a UAE-based company, but I've actually found that, again, because of the use of Teams and Zoom, I've been able to visit a lot more of my sites, a lot more of my factories, a lot more of our offices. You know, we have offices between Abu Dhabi, we have sites in Fujairah, and in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So I no longer need to be in a specific location for a set meeting. I could be on the way from one project in Fujairah to my office in Dubai while being in a meeting in the car.
Okay, so you're repurposing how you use technology then?
100%. And actually, I found that it's freed up a lot more of my time, that I'm able to be anywhere, and I'll be able to attend whatever meeting I need to attend. And actually, I found that the meetings on Team and on Zooms are more productive in the sense that in order to present something, it's much easier. Everybody has their screen in front of them. Everybody can, the screen is up right in front of your face. You're not sitting in a meeting room at the back of the meeting room where someone's trying to present something on a TV that's on the front of the meeting room, and you have to walk up to the front of the meeting room to see what's on the TV. Now it's all in your face. Whoever's presenting can point their arrows, can show exactly. It's much easier to follow a presentation, I find.
Okay, so Nour, Kareem and Tertius have both been talking really there about how they're repurposing technology that's existing technology and how it's radically changing the way they work and how their teams work. Are you finding that a lot of technology use now is just becoming much, much more strategic? And what does that mean? How does that mean companies have to rethink their approach as well and their investments? You're on mute, Nour.
Hey, Rob, definitely, Rob. And I could share with you the Parsons experience, and I could tell you that I also did read about some of our peers in the same industry doing the same thing. Like Kareem says, and others on the call here, technology has been around for quite some time. You got cloud technology, you got VDI technology, you got Nathan mentioned the common data environment, and there are multiple technologies there that allows collaboration between various parties within the supply chain on a project. Those technologies have been there. There has been no challenges with that. In our industry, it's a legacy industry that is known that it resists, it resists, the change. Okay, change is a major resistance within our industry because it's a legacy industry. It takes time to change that culture. But with COVID-19, what it did, it really forced us into a situation we need to think through on how to adapt, to the new norm. So what we've done at Parsons is, okay, so we reacted immediately, and we're lucky that we had the technology and the IT infrastructure to react immediately to the COVID-19 impact. We were able to move thousands of people to MS Teams within few weeks, and people were able to collaborate. But there are other implications that we had to think through as how we're going to strategically address that. Over time, and I could basically comfortably say that other organizations probably are facing the same issues. Our industry, our data is distributed everywhere. Companies have multiple offices worldwide or regionally, and data is located in multiple servers, PCs, USBs, you name it. Now, that was fine and dandy. You could manage with that when you have people working in offices. There's mass concentration. But now with COVID, now that data is still where it is, but employees are distributed everywhere. Reaching that data and be able to do your work using the application from the desktop, it's a challenge, because especially with those applications that's data intensive. So we had to think through how we're going to do this strategically. Although we had interim technology to kind of basically put a band-aid on the situation in order to cope with COVID, and we were able to do that. But strategically, we had to think through differently on how we're going to do things. Data has to be centralized, first and foremost, in the cloud. Cloud has been there for a while, but I don't think it has been used in a strategic way. It was more used in a tactical way. But now with COVID, organizations start thinking differently. They need to centralize. They start thinking about centralizing data, using VDI to bring the data and application close to each other, so that data-intensive application can really do, allow the employees or engineers to do the work with a higher productivity compared to when they were in the offices. The other things that we need to look at is, now that you have thousands of people working from their homes and remotely, you're going to deal with issues that you didn't do. We didn't have to deal with it before. Is from a productivity standpoint. People, especially in this region, they have shared accommodation, whether with their families or with other roommates, and they share the internet connectivity and what have you. So there's quite a bit an impact on their productivity just from the internet connectivity itself, not mind you what's happening at that PC level. So you have to look at what tools you need to have in place in order to be able to monitor what's going on at that desktop, so that when the employee calls and says, I have an issue, well, there's a stack of possible root causes to the issue that you need to be able to hone in on and identify the issue and fix it. So we had to think through all of that. Right now we have a plan in place to really implement that at multiple levels that address all these issues. Last but not least, being that we are an international company, like I said, the data has been distributed in local servers to really address the needs. But now with the centralization of the data, now you got to think about data sovereignty. You got to think about commercial versus non-commercial type projects. You got to think about, data intensive application, how you're going to deal with that and all of that. So all of this collectively, we have mapped it all out, and then we developed a roadmap, if we will, a multi-year program in order to address this whole new norm strategically. And I could tell you that, I'd even talked to Gartner about that. They did share with me that that's a very sound thought process that they start to see other companies start looking at that in the same way.
And Kareem, actually, because Nour was mentioning the cloud and collaboration, I know that's something you've also been looking at in your company.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually been a lot of technologies that we've been looking at in our company for a few years now. Like I said before, we like to see ourselves, the ECC Group, as a forward-thinking company and trying to keep up with technology. I mean, construction has always been very, very far behind when it comes to technology. So yeah, over the last, I'd say 7-8 years, we've been trying to really implement technology into our company. We've started to look at, I mean, we're a group of companies, right? So we have ECC, which is the construction. You have Abanos, which is the joinery and fit out factory. You have United Masters, which is the MEP, Prime Metal, which is the metal and aluminium. So we have factories, we have sites, we even have a small development company called Aurora. So, we have about 8,000 employees, and trying to administrate all those employees, you definitely need to bring technologies forward to make your company more efficient. And these days, with the budgets becoming a lot more tighter, there's a lot more competition. You definitely need to focus on making your company more efficient. I mean,
you were telling me yesterday that you'd even done things like remove the USB ports, just to make sure that to really force that through.
Yeah, so 100%. We removed the USBs to force people to go on to using the clouds, cloud services, shared drives. We've introduced bots now, so that, for example, before, where we had an employee copying someone's passport and entering it into the government website, now we have a bot that you just scan the passport and it enters all the information into the government website. And you can imagine, we have different cultures and different names, and especially in the Indian culture, some of the names you find in the passports are extremely long. So you get a lot of human error that comes in. So the bots now come in, they'll work 8 times faster. They work 24 hours a day. 3D printing is something that's been around for a while. I mean, we've actually, ECC, we've done the largest 3D printed building in the world. We're actually in the Guinness Book of Records for it. It was finished about 2 or 3 years ago, I think. I think you'll also see a lot more. I mean, they were pushing for 3D printing before, but I think as we advance now and as it becomes more difficult to bring labor onto site and as it becomes more expensive to have labor, you'll be forced into things like 3D printing, more modular construction. I mean, again, modular construction has been out there for a while. You have pods, you have for MEP, you can, like in our MEP section, United Masters, we're now setting up a factory where they will do they'll produce like parts for the corridors off-site and then bring them as one piece so that you can just shift them up and install them into the ceiling of the corridors in your buildings. There are technologies out there to monitor your concrete after you've casted it, which will reduce your cycle and you'll be able to remove your shutter earlier. There is RFID where you can control the number of laborers if they're in a productive zone or not. You have augmented reality, you have virtual reality that we're looking at as well. And then you go into the renewable energies again about making your company efficient. You know, as power is getting more expensive, we are looking into more renewable energies. So we looked at solar powered generators. We actually did this about 4 or 5 years ago. Unfortunately, the technology wasn't quite up to the standard to be able to handle things like tower cranes, because tower cranes have a massive spike in power when they lift up heavy equipment. So the generators couldn't handle that at that time, but I think now they've brought it up to a stage where you would be able to power your generators, your tower cranes from a solar power generator. Communication services, like we said, Teams and Zoom. We've implemented Lean across all of our group of companies as well. GPS on all of our fleet. Project management softwares, snagging softwares, so that now you can go on site and just from your mobile phone, you can do your snags in your apartment rather than having a camera that you take a picture, having to go back to the office, plug the camera into your laptop and waste so much time. Now you just do it directly from your phone. We also have our own, we've created our own, we've hired some coders within our company so that we can create our own platform in order to create our own systems so that we can monitor certain processes, we can see certain reports and certain dashboards. So yeah, there's a whole range of technologies that we've been looking at that we definitely need to now look at more as COVID-19 has made life more difficult in the construction industry.
So I'm going to go to audience questions in a moment because I can see we've actually got quite a few. But Nathan, before I do, I just wanted to ask you briefly. We've heard, I mean, Kareem there was giving a whole list of technologies that are being used. Tertius also gave a number of technologies, and Nour, how it's all changing thinking. So now that organizations have started to see these possibilities, is the tap open? Is it going to start becoming easier to successfully mount a business case in future for technology adoption?
Yeah, okay, I will keep it brief. Yeah, I think construction technology has clearly led the way globally for the last 20 plus years in the centralization of data and the management of distributed projects. Organizations like Gartner, which Nour mentioned, are really playing catch up to a significant degree where they've ignored this space in favor of financial services and other sexier technologies, if I can call them that. And they're really starting to see the innovation that's occurred here in our space for what it is, which is world leading. So all of these technologies need an ecosystem, and in order to drive that ecosystem, we need organizations like Parsons and like ECC and all these organizations to be able to have their own centers of expertise and to collaborate openly with the wider vendor ecosystem. There is a huge amount of innovation to come, huge amount of capital available in the markets to fund that innovation. It's a very exciting time actually because of that. I think we've all been saying, COVID has accelerated this, but it's not new. we're kind of on the crest of a wave, which is pushing forward with great might. And I think we all need to stay on the board and ride it out.
So looking at, we've got a lot of questions here about prefab. It's clearly very interesting, but we don't really have a prefab expert on the panel. So I think what I'll do is, if I go to a question here where I'm going to combine two questions because I think they're both good questions. One of them is saying that the problem with all companies, small and large, is that they tend to use technologies and neglect the users. And if the user then doesn't obviously embrace it, the technology fails. So is that mentality changing? And then I think combined with that is, even with all these initiatives, is the construction industry on the same efficiency in the way it runs, or is it now a lower efficiency, or do you think it's become more efficient as an industry? I think maybe Nour, but that would be good for you, and then maybe Tertius.
Okay, how much time do I have?
A couple of minutes.
Okay,
we've got a few more questions.
Yeah, we got to remember that technology is a mean for an end, and not an end to a mean, and that's very, very important. So you first need to start with what's the process that you need to enable through technology to justify the use of the technology, and not the other way around. So much so you do that, then the rate of adoption becomes the successful rate of adoption becomes much higher. Okay, as opposed if you just trying to implement technology for the sake of technology. Okay, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the second part of the question?
So the second part of the question, which was about the efficiency, what's this doing to the efficiency of the construction sector? Same as, better, or lower?
Okay, that's a loaded question. All right, I could tell you that within the technology adoption, within the remit of an organization, irrespective of where that organization fall within the supply chain of the AC industry, I don't think it's an issue. It's when it comes to technology that requires collaborations with other third parties, that's where it becomes an issue, because it comes down to who's going to pay for it. All right, our industry is known to be a services-based industry. All right. Wherein from a contractual standpoint, it's basically, there is no incentive in those projects and those contracts to really push the use of technology, right? Because it is not outcome based. Those contracts are not outcome based; they are services based. As such, because of that, organizations are limited to use technology that is within their remit, okay, to deliver on their deliverables. But when it comes to using collaboration systems, collaborative type systems, then it becomes a challenge. Is who's going to pay for it? What's my part of it? What's my share of that cost, or what have you? Because it's services based. Where if it was outcome based, wherein owners and operators share the risk and rewards of adopting technology with the supply chain, then it's a different ball game for all the players, within that industry. And that speaks to why, if you look at the stats that are out there, the engineering and construction is the second lowest among other industries in terms of technology adoption. Mm-hmm. And there is a reason for that. It's because, at the end of the day, who's going to pay for it, right? So long as services based, everybody is gonna, within that supply chain, is gonna say, well, okay, how much is my cost exposure that I have to commit to, and I'm gonna inject it in my proposal or in my project price. Wherein if it was outcome based, and the risk and rewards are shared between owners and the entire supply chain, then it's a different story. Then you see innovation becomes at the forefront of every project, as opposed as an afterthought if it is services based. And that has been the challenge of this industry, as why is the adoption of technology is being pulled back. There's technology out there that is mature, that can be adopted on an AEC project, but what's stopping us really, it's the commercial model that's stopping the supply chain to really adopt it widely.
Yeah, if I can add to what Nour was saying, I mean, for us, for example, at ECC, BIM, for example, BIM has been trying to be forced into the industry for a while now, and we were finding a few years back that we were getting asked to tender for projects with BIM and without BIM. And of course, with BIM was a lot more expensive than without BIM. And a few years back, companies were starting to look into it, and the initial investment for BIM in a construction, I can talk on behalf of a construction company, was quite substantial. We ended up in ECC taking the decision that we were going to implement it regardless of a developer wanting BIM on their project, so that we could stay ahead of the game. And actually, we were actually the first construction company to get the ISO certified BIM certificate. And it has helped us because we have implemented it even onto projects that BIM was not a requirement for. It's helped us internally to become a lot more efficient. Now, again, like what you were saying, yes, with technologies, you do have that risk of implementing a technology and only using 10% of what it can give you. And with BIM, for example, for BIM to give you 100% efficiency, you need to have all parties on it. You can't just have the contractor using it and the subcontractors not using it, for example. So for it to be fully utilized, you need to have everybody on it. So yes, as much as you could try and bring technologies in, there is a massive risk of companies only using that technology to 10% of what it can be used for. And it's up to you as a company to ensure that you're constantly talking to the service providers to make sure that your company is using it and utilizing it to the maximum that it can be used. And if you do that, the technology will make your company a lot more efficient. And your company needs to be more efficient to survive in this market. It's no longer the early 2000s where you could have massive profit margins, there was work for everybody, and you could be inefficient. I always said if you dropped a company from the UAE into Europe or the States, it would fail. With all the taxes and the competition, they would fail. And now the UAE is turning into this first world country where there is a lot more competition, the margins are a lot more tighter, and you are forced to become a more efficient business to survive.
Okay, so we've got 2 minutes. So I'm going to just ask Nathan and Tertius, because neither of you have spoken for a while. Just if you could maybe just give some final thoughts on how you're seeing technology changing and what you think this could mean for the future. So Nathan first, and then Tertius, you can close.
Yeah, well, that's a very broad question, but
Yes.
I'll keep it super brief. We've seen an arc if I just stick to the past 20 years of the cloud-based technologies coming to the fore, and one of the things we've seen is that we've gone past the point of the idea that everything is there on tap, regardless of where it actually sits, where the actual data sits, and the kind of what I call the nationalization of data residency is a big thing now. Every different jurisdiction in the world, or every economy, so the UAE in this case, needs to have its data resident and local, and that's a big shift for providers like ourselves and others. Which we're on top of, but it's something that needs to be looked at. We all it's no longer just the magic cloud where the data is somewhere out there. I don't care where. People need to be able to not quite touch and feel it, but at least know it's in Abu Dhabi or wherever it is. Yeah.
Okay, and Tertius?
Thanks, Rob. From our side to finalize, I think what this whole situation and technology adoption is bringing to the table is just how important our data is becoming to us on a daily basis, where it's located, because we don't have that luxury, if I can put it that way, to see each other face to face in an office environment anymore. So we need to have a flexible environment to work in. But also what we need to, and this is maybe something which also comes to the table, is the risks that is involved with people not working from the office, as an example, where we're so used to having enterprise class security systems in place, versus people working from home now. So I think the cybersecurity conversation is also becoming extremely important now, and that goes hand in hand with data integrity and just where our data is located. So I think from our side, technology will keep on improving and evolving, and there might be no reason, or it's a good time to really start using it, because it just makes our lives easier at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. And thank you everyone for your time today, and a very interesting conversation.